Hi. I just spilled something. Okay. So, just like last time, technically, I'm going to hang out. So, this will be pause if somebody comes in. Okay. And just like before, I've got the rubric here. Wait, there we go. And so, whenever I'm writing stuff, I'm just making notes and I'm following the rubric. Okay. Did you say something in your. Okay, so you did time yourself. Okay. Whale. Okay. So what is this one? Okay, the World Wars one. Okay. The strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed in World War World War II, by killing people, by destroying cities, and lowering the habitat's morale. The habitants. I was like, habitats morale? You're fine. I read it wrong. Okay, so there's your thesis. The habitats. Oh my gosh. I think I've graded like okay. So you for sure have your thesis. You have your stem here. You're good. And then you have your 3 points. The first point is going to be killing people, destroying cities, and morale. Okay. During this time, many countries wanted to own as much land as they could. Many countries invaded smaller countries because they were weaker. Because of this, many other countries, okay, it's getting confusing, tried to defend smaller countries from getting invaded. Also, some countries didn't like each other because of World War I, which started because, okay, that's fine. You have your context if the person's nice to you. Again, like last time, I feel like if I was grading these, I would for sure give you your context because I know you know what you're talking about. I can tell from what you've written. I think because it's confusing though, and here's why it's confusing. During this time, many countries wanted to own as much land as they could. Many countries invaded smaller countries because they were weaker. Because of this, many other countries tried to defend smaller countries, and then also some countries, be careful with like repeating, because okay, let me change that. I was gonna say I don't know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, but if I don't know, if Andrew or Brandon read this, now they're little kids, but that's okay. If they read this because they don't know about World War I and World War II, I think they'd be confused. During this time, many countries wanted to own as much land as they could. So, okay. All right, so here's how you would fix it. Okay, so during this time, many countries wanted to own as much land as they could. So they invaded smaller countries since they were weaker, period. Let's see. The smaller countries, no. You just can't keep using the word countries. To ensure a balance of power, other countries defended. How could you connect that sentence? Many countries invaded smaller countries because they were weaker. During this time, many countries wanted to own as much land as they could, so they invaded smaller countries since they were weaker, period. As a result, okay, look. As a result, you could say because of this, but whatever. As a result, and because they did not like each other, other countries would defend. There we go. That would help it make sense. Again, it's for me, I say you got context. Do I know if they would because it's so confusing? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so we have our first two. So this should be about, so we have killing. Okay, killing? Yes. Okay, so the strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed in World War II by killing people. Document 7. I love Document 7. Document 7 is about a nurse giving her point of view of when people got hurt by bombing. She is a nurse, and because of that, she wants her people to be healthy and not hurt by the bombings. Her purpose is to show people how the bombings were horrible and affected many innocent people. The document points out how the death of people was solemn, tragic, dignified, but here, it was grotesque, repulsive, and horrible. Okay, so you have your evidence and analysis. Coming in here, she is a nurse. Because she is a nurse, right here, wherever it was, here we go. She wants people to be healthy. You did it. You did her point of view, so that's analysis. So you use document 7 to be the evidence part because it is backing up your point. And it's also analysis because down here you talked about her being a nurse and all, like her point of view. Let's see. Okay, right here. This means that people had horrible deaths because of the bombings. Having less people in their city would also mean having less people to work to help the city after. To help the city what? Having less people in their city would also mean having less people to rebuild after the bombings. That's okay. Okay, document 6. Document 6 is a picture of a monument to remind humans of the terrible things it has done. What has done? To remind humans of the terrible things bombing has done. The monument reminds us, leave me out. Remember? Don't include me. Okay, the monument reminds people. The monument is a reminder of how that many people died because of the bombings. So you have your evidence point here. Many of the people that died had families. These families had to go through the grief and pain of losing someone important. This would make it even harder for the city to recover from the bombing. The strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed in World War II by killing people. So I gave you, so you have 2 documents. So you're already at 2 points. Plus your thesis and possibly context, so that's 4. Plus your analysis for the whole nurse thing. You're already at 5 from what I say. Okay, so the next one. The strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed by World War II by destroying cities. Document 2 is about Alexander Seversky, however you say his name, a U.S. Air Force, a U.S. Army Air Force, what? Like, we need to know what he was. You could put pilot, because this right here, U.S. Army Air Force, it tells me where he's from, which is important for point of view. That's good for analysis. It tells me that he's part of the Army Air Force. But is he a pilot? Is he a sit at the desk and like pencil pusher? What is he? Okay, so document 2. Document 2 is about this guy, Alex, who was blah, 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 period. Because he was in the U.S. Army Air Force, the U.S. Air Force, He probably wanted the US to win this war. Good. He wrote this because he wanted the US to attack more important places instead of cities. He wrote what? I know that you're about to quote it. Document 2 is about Alexander, a member of the US Army Air Force, who wanted the US to win since he was in the military. In fact, he wanted the US to attack more important cities, or more important places, instead of cities, as stated in document 2. More than ever, the principal objectives will be critical aggregates of electric power, aviation industries, dock facility. Okay, so you have your evidence point there. This means that he wanted them to attack other places rather than cities. This means that he wanted them to attack other places rather than cities. I would get rid of this whole sentence right here. This right here. Because right here you already said, this means he wanted them to attack other places rather than cities. Other militarily important places rather than cities. Their destruction was only focused on cities. The cities were destroyed and it took many years to rebuild them. Document 4 is about the attacks on Japan during World War II. It points out how in the single deadliest air raid of World War II, 330 American B-29s, blah, 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 blah. Okay, this means, I'm right here. I'm worried about you using too many quotes. I know you're like, I only use like 2. Just be careful. Don't use too many quotes. You explain the document in your own words. Like, I don't even need to know this quote. You don't even include the quotes. Document 4 is about the attacks on Japan during World War II, and it points out how when the Allies attacked cities, they destroyed them. There was nothing the citizens could do to rebuild the cities, which meant that they took longer, to rebuild. This would make the life of those citizens not as good as it was before the bombing. The strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed. Okay, so you have your evidence point. Just don't waste your time writing the quote. Worry about explaining the quotes. We don't need to know the actual quote. Explain it, put it in your own words, which is absolutely what you did here. Just leave this. Why didn't it? Just leave this out. Here's how it sounds if you do that. Oh man. Sheesh, man. Here's how it sounds if you do that. I'm starting right here. Right here. The cities were destroyed and took many years to rebuild them. Document 4 is about the attacks on Japan during World War II, and it points out how, come down here, when the Allies attacked cities, they destroyed them. There was nothing the citizens could do to rebuild the city, which meant that it took longer to rebuild. This would make the life of those citizens not as good as before the bombing. The strategic bombings negatively affected. Nothing was learned here except details. And if you wanted to add in details, you could say they totally attacked the cities with, 330 American B-29s. You don't necessarily need the quote. You could talk about the fact that it killed 100,000 plus, but you don't need the quote. So just don't waste your time, because you only have 45 minutes. Don't waste your time rewriting the quotes. Focus on explaining the quotes. So as of right now, you have 4 documents, which means you're sitting at 3. I gave you an analysis point for whatever it was. The nurse. I'm going to write that here before I forget. And then I gave you context, but that's questionable. I just don't know what they'll do. And then I gave you thesis. So for sure, according to me, you're sitting at 3, 4, 5, maybe 6. Okay, and we still have another paragraph to go. All right, the strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed in World War II by lowering the morale of the habitants. During World War II, the US used atomic bombs against Japan. Atomic bomb burns, okay, do not heal like normal burns. Is this outside evidence, I believe? They heal from the inside out, which means that the healing process would take longer and be way more painful. This means that the Japanese had to experience a lot of pain and suffering from the bombings, which would make them feel worse about themselves and have lower morale. So Japan, outside evidence, number 1. Where is it? Okay, right here. If they had lower morale, they would not work as hard to rebuild their city, which would leave them. Okay, yeah, which would leave them, you're right, at a big disadvantage. Document 3 points out how President Truman's object is to save as many lives as possible. But I also have a humane feeling for the women and children in Japan. So you don't need it. It's another quote because right after it, you explain it. So it's another quote that you really, you don't need. 45 minutes. Don't worry about rewriting the quotes. Document 3 points out how President Truman's object. I actually don't have a problem with that quote. Document 3 points out how President Truman's object is to save as many American lives as possible. Stop. Do ... and be done with it. That's it. This right here doesn't need to be here. Here's how it would read if you left it out. Document 3 points out how President Truman's object is to save as many lives as possible, in quotes. Meaning, he would not use the bombs or attack them if it were not completely necessary. There we go. Did I write down document 3? Yes. This means that President Truman knew the effect of the bombs and did not want to make Japan go through that suffering if it was not necessary. This shows how dangerous the bombs can be to humans and how they must go through so much because of a bomb. Going through a bomb will lower a person's morale because of how dehumanizing it can be. Even though some people might argue. What? Well, yeah, I am, but it's okay.
You still want the same stuff from Mexican places.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. My dad's going to get food. Okay, so I wrote 1 and then I didn't know why I wrote a 1. It's because 1 point for synthesize. Okay. All right, right here. Right here. Even though some people might argue that bombings were a good thing because they helped one side of the war win more easily and finish the war so there could be peace in the world, the bombings were the beginning of a new type of weapon, good, that would unleash more wars, good, around the world. The strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed in World War II by lowering the habitants' morale. In summary, the strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed by killing people. I don't know that I would do that as a whole separate paragraph. Because this right here, you've already said it multiple times, I wouldn't worry about it. Is there anything wrong with it? No. It's just kind of weird. It's its own little paragraph sentence. Okay, so now let me look. So, thesis, faux show. Context, maybe. you have your 3 points here. Oh, you're not looking at what I'm looking at. You have your 3 points for evidence for using at least 4 of the documents to prove your point. Not to just mention what the document's about, but to prove your point. And then I gave you 2 points for outside evidence because you talked about right here. I don't know where it was. Oh, right here. Some outside evidence here. And then you talked about the outside evidence wherever it was about the atomic bomb burns. Yeah? Good job, by the way. Okay, so as of right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7. You for sure get your synthesis point. And then I gave you 1 analysis point. Am I off? Why am I off? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh. Okay. I only saw analysis once with. It's just the dogs. I only saw analysis once with the nurse. U.S. Army Air Force. He wanted them to win, so he suggested. You have analysis twice. So analysis with the Air Force guy. You're probably sitting there like, duh, I know that. Good job. Okay, so you have your 2 points there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. Okay. So I gave you thesis. I gave you your 3 points plus thesis. Your 3 points for using 4 documents to prove your point. Your 2 outside evidence points. Your 2 analysis points for the nurse and for the Air Force guy and synthesis. But there's only 1. And it's just that context. I don't know if they would consider. I just don't know if this is enough information for them. Enough specific information. I know what you're talking about. I just don't know if it's specific enough. I don't mean enough information. I mean, it's enough. Is it specific enough? During this time, many countries wanted to own as much land as they could. Many countries invaded smaller countries because they were weaker. Because of this, many other countries tried to defend smaller countries from getting invaded. I don't know. You could separate it by saying Western European and Eastern European. You could have been more specific by naming countries specifically. Or like I did in the example earlier, just leave out some of these countries. During this time, many countries wanted to own as much land as they could, so they invaded other places that were weaker. See, you could have done that by omitting some of this confusion part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7. Using the word country. How many sentences do you have? 1, 2, 3. Just a little. 7 times in 3 sentences is just confusing. I don't know if they would give it to you or not. I would feel like a historian would. I don't know if Bob, who's grading the test, Bob, who's a U.S. history person grading the test, would give it to you. I don't know. So I say for sure 9 out of 10, and then that extra is questionable. So you're on the right track. Keep doing what you're doing. Where you're getting hung up is like grammar stuff. So the fact that you have all of your TCEAS, you're good. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't let the grammar part be like, oh, she said I can't. You have 45 minutes. keep doing TCEAS. And then if you end up with like 5 seconds at the end, not 5 seconds, don't do that. But if you end up with like 7 minutes or whatever at the end, reread and start, you know what I mean? They'll be able to, I mean, they, again, I feel like a broken record. They know you're not going to finish. They don't necessarily expect you to finish because, especially like TCEAY, somebody asked me this, and this is like, I'm probably going to include this when I teach this next year. TCEAY isn't like, first I do thesis, then I do context, then I do evidence. It is that way with thesis and context, but not evidence analysis and synthesis. Evidence and analysis and synthesis are all woven together. If you look here at this nurse paragraph, oops, okay, the strategic bombings negatively affected areas bombed in World War II by killing people. That's your paragraph thesis sentence. Okay, so we know what the paragraph is about. Then, document 7 is about a nurse giving her point of view of when people got hurt by bombing. She is a nurse, and because of that, she wants people to be healthy and not hurt by the bombings. Synthesis. Normally, you would do synthesis at the end. That's not synthesis. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Analysis. Normally, you would do that at the end, but you introduced it. That's fine. Her purpose is to show people how the bombings were horrible and affected many innocent people. She documents how the death was, oh, I just lost it, of people was solemn, tragic, dignified, grotesque, repulsive, horrible. That's evidence. Oh, and then your synthesis was down there. So just understand, like, sometimes you'll do evidence first, where you'll use the thing like this right here to back up your point. And sometimes, like you did here, you'll do analysis first, where you do HIP first. It's not always going to be the same. So as long as you have those right, TCAS, because I'm saying this because I know you and you're a perfectionist. And I don't want you to get stressed over the grammar and stressed over the, oh my gosh, she said that I can't use us and I used us. Or, oh my gosh, I don't need to write quotes. Don't write quotes simply because it's going to waste your time. There's nothing wrong with having a quote in your paper. And like I said, after reading this one with Truman, I think this one should be here because it's your point. It's what you're saying, that he wanted to save as many lives as possible. There's nothing wrong with using quotes. I'm just saying leave it out so that you don't get tied up typing 400 million quotes and you don't have enough time to write your evidence or your, like your this means that. Does that make sense? So, anyway, again, I say 9 points. Who knows what'll really happen? But, and you should have gotten your e-ticket. I talked to someone else earlier this morning and he was like, okay, I have an email, has an e-ticket in it. So it's getting real now. It's getting real and it's getting exciting. All right, if you have questions, let me know. Bye.